Hello everyone. This is the first episode of my series on the APIs. This channel is my quest to put together 20 years of my experience and learning into a very simplified format in a hope that it will help somebody. I like to learn and I would like to make that learning experience as simple as possible. So let's discuss about APIs. So what is API? In very simplified definition, it can be considered as a software intermediary which helps apps and services to communicate and transfer the data. In a sense, they are a set of definitions and protocol. It's always important to understand history to better appreciate the current world and the future. So, what is the history of an API? Well, it's easy to explain and it's hard to explain. Early life of development was standalone. Our world evolved. Systems then had to talk to each other and we invented API. In software world, almost everything can be considered as an API. Like compiler, the code has to call compiler API to compile. Talk to the database, we need an API. So let's look at the most popular APIs, but before that, let us see the history. Now 1970 can be considered, in my opinion, as the real programming applications when actual programming started in real world. Prior to that, there was an API. It was electronic direct interchange. In 1970s, it became a very standardized and formal API, which was message oriented middleware. It is where we see the foundation laid for today's so-called smart middlewares like Kafka or RabbitMQ. It was 1980s when things become little object oriented or things become little closer to the programming when the RPCs evolved. Those were the remote procedure calls. This was the same era when there was socket and now we can talk one computer another computer where one computer open a socket, other one can transfer the data and listen to data on the same socket. Things become more formal, standardized, structural in 1990s when we got introduced with the software oriented architecture SOA, where there's a standardized contract and people says that instead of having the client and server architecture, why not have my business procedures as common and let them talk to each other with a defined WSDL. 2000 onwards, things becomes more advanced when we get to know the rest, representational state transfer. This is the same time where we are right now, where we also see the evolution of gRPCs and most recently the GraphQL, where instead of we to ask one field and get the entire data and then we discard it, we can right away ask specific field in the form of GraphQL. Alright, so that was a very brief about what API is, how it evolved, where we are right now. I'll continue this series with a upcoming episode where we deep dive into the latest and the greatest APIs like REST, gRPCs and GraphQL. So stay tuned. Thanks for your time.